All right, it's about time. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this CPGIS webinar. And today we are delighted to have Dr. A-Xing for this webinar. And before I introducing Dr. Zhu, is there any announcement from the CPGIS leadership?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wu. And this is the continuous of the CPGIS educational webinar series that led by Professor Qiushen Wu and also Professor Jun Li from China. And we will actually have a continuous webinar series about scientific writing, but also on the other research topics. So you can follow us through our official website or from Eventbrite, or if you use WeChat, you can also scan the QR code and to follow us. And we're also looking for the educational webinar sponsorship. If you like to co-organize or support our webinar series. So that's all from the CPGIS side.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gao, for the introduction. And so for those of you who are new to CPGIS, CPGIS stands for the International Association of Chinese Professionals in Geographic Information Sciences. It was established in 1992. And next year will be the 30-year anniversary. And so we have a lot of events coming next year. And so for this webinar series, this is the first one. For this, the last one in 2021. So in spring 2022, we're going to have another series of webinars. So stay tuned, and you're welcome to scan the QR code at the lower right corner there to subscribe to the WeChat group. And we're also looking for sponsorship. If you're interested in sponsor any of the future webinars, please contact me by email. And so some housekeeping. If you have any questions during the webinar, you're welcome to send a question in the chat box, and we will close the monitoring the questions, and we have time for questions and answers at the end. So right now, only the host and co-host can unmute and speak for themselves. If you have any questions later, you can raise your hand, and we'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask questions, but you're also welcome to send questions in the chat box. All right, so next, let me give a quick introduction to Dr. Zhu. He is a full professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He teaches courses on GIS and environmental modeling. He currently serves as the editor-in-chief of Annals of GIS. His research interests include GIS and spatial prediction, intelligent geocomputing, environmental modeling, and scenario analysis. His signature work on spatial prediction in soil mapping was showcased at a congressional briefing in 2003 on the role of geographic information science and technology in meeting the nation's scientific, economic, and social needs. He has published 3 books and also 300 research articles. 240 of them are HCI index articles, and he also received numerous awards for his outstanding research work. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Zhu for the presentation.
Thank you, Professor Wu. I'm going to take over now. So
let me stop sharing.
All right. Okay, I'm going to grab my stuff over here, and then I'll share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my? Okay, good. Well, thank you, Professor Wu and Professor Gao, and for this opportunity to speak to all of you. Before I go to my talk, I will do a little quick status report on Annals GIS. Annals GIS is an official journal of the Association of Chinese Professors in Geographic Information Sciences. I'm currently serving as an editor-in-chief. So it is an open access journal. We all know that what open access means, but the important thing for Annals GIS is the author doesn't have to pay for the open access fee. That fee are currently being paid by Nanjing Normal University. So, so I want to take this opportunity to express the appreciation from this journal and also the readership to Nanjing Normal University for their generosity to make all the paper published in this journal readily accessible to all of you. Here's the website. You can get to the journal. So a journal, the important journal is how widely reaching the audience and how much is being cited by other scholars. So one of the important thing is look at the SCI metrics, the SCI score. So currently the SCI score is actually ranked in the first quarter, top 25% of the journal in its category. So we are pretty well positioned, okay? And also we process paper pretty rapidly. So 44 days typically for the first edition, basically the first review, and 54 days the second review, and then 23 days from acceptance to publications. Our acceptance rates rather compatible or competitive compared to the other journals that currently are in this category. We have 45% acceptance rate. More than half the paper are not accepted. So that's mean the paper accepted this journal certainly at a high quality as well. The other thing I want to emphasize that is the journal has been indexed by Claret, ESA-CI, Scopus, and the recently newly established index called Open Access Journal Index and GeoBase, right? Those are the key databases. The other thing that most people are interested in knowing what the impact factor. So currently the marked impact factor for 2021 is about 3.2. So it's a reasonable number that I think is respectable in a way that showing the impact of the journal. Okay. We also hold 3 awards for the paper published in this journal. So the first 2 are based on purely on a numerical. The first one is called Most Cited Papers. Taylor Francis, the publisher, provided all the numbers. So every year we see which other papers cited the most by others. So we give awards. Actually, there are 3 awards in there: first, second, third. And the second category is also based on numerical, based on the quality of downloads. So the most download paper also coming from Taylor and Francis. The third one is the Best Paper Awards that is evaluated by the editors of this journal. We have 8 editors. So I'm the chief editor, and also there's 7 associate editors. So we come together and then look at the paper published in that year, and then pick the best 3 papers in this journal. So this particular category will receive a mandatory award starting from 2022. So so the awards will come up sometime in January. So stay tuned for that. So key points here is that this journal is open access, but also fee paid for by Nanjing Normal University. The second one is widely indexed. It's indexed in a major journal, and also achieving a very good influence in this community. And the processing time is pretty fast. So we welcome you to contribute to this journal in a variety of ways, either submit a paper or propose a special issue or even serve as a reviewer. We appreciate that. And also, I want to see that is to tell people that we have two ways to staying in tune with the journal. One is to scan this barcode, WeChat barcode. For those of you who do not use WeChat, I suggest that you get onto the mailing list. So we have a mailing list, which currently maintained by myself. So you can send me email, and I'll be happy to add you to the list. So that will be my I'm gonna move this thing. I hope I'm not blocking you guys. So the title of the talk I'm giving today is really derived from my personal experience at the editor-in-chief journal, and also my as a reviewer I served before, and also the experience I have in writing my own research papers. So this is called increasing the likelihood of your paper being accepted. So today I'm coming from this particular angle. I'm not talking about the research quality itself. That's a separate topic. I'm saying how would you put a research result together and publish, so that there will be the likelihood that people appreciate what you've done. Okay, so I come from in three major topics areas. The first one is look at the characteristics of an empirical research paper. Okay, I'm not talking about all kind of research papers. There are different kind of paper published in journals, but here I'm only looking at a very basic introductory level of a kind of research in terms of the category. Some of the conceptual papers that have a very different form. So mostly this particular target is suited for early career researchers. Okay, so an empirical paper basically is report the findings through some experiment. Okay, that's basically it is in empirical studies. And then I talk about, for this kind of paper, what kind of structure should adopt, right? So the third one, I say, now you know the important characteristics of those empirical papers, and also you know what kind of structure you want to have for your paper, and how you combine these two together to make those characteristics outstanding. I believe once you have those characteristics of the paper outstanding, clear, the chance for the paper being accepted is very high. Okay, I wouldn't want to get a percentage, but if you force me to do it, probably around 80% paper would be accepted. My experience has been pretty good, higher than that, but on the conservative side, sort of pretty around that level. So I use some examples in this particular talk, and there's sort of two papers listed here, so you can get hold of it. In the chat box, we have some. We have a link to the first paper, which is open access, published in Annals GIS. The second paper is published in Land Degradation Development, which is not in open access, but Professor Sung Gao has temporarily posted at a site, so you can download that paper. Now, I won't be able to go through this paper in detail, but I will point to this paper, some position, locations. You can certainly follow along if you wanted to, but I have that information in the slides. But I would suggest you probably will able to look at it after this presentation. Okay, so what are the characteristics of an empirical research paper, or a good empirical research paper? First of all, it has to have a clear research aim. Now, aim is very broader term, but here referring is a clear research question. Okay. The second one is it has to be a well-justified novelty. You basically say you have to justify this question that is new, that has not been addressed or sufficiently addressed. Okay. The third element of that paper should be that your rest of the paper should structure around that research question. Okay, so it's not a project report paper. It is a paper designed around a scientific question. So it is the scientific question that is at the center or at the heart of the paper. Right. This is a major probably distinction one want to be aware of. We have seen a lot of papers, at least since I've been editor of this journal over the last almost three years. I see a lot of paper come in as kind of project report. Now they don't have any particular question. They just tell you where they did it, and then present the result. Doesn't focus on any issue that they're trying to get to. So that will be very difficult for the reviewer to see this, to see the contribution or the novelty of the paper and the contribution to the literature. Okay, so let me explain these three characteristics a bit more. The first one is a clear research aim. So in one paper, there should only be one and only one research question. It should not be addressing multiple questions. Empirical paper often follows so-called hypothesis testing approach or control experiment approach. But those kind of efforts is best done in focus on one question. So it must be a clear statement about the research aim or the question, the issue this particular paper to address. So that's the number one. So here's some good example I thought would be good taken from this particular, the two examples. The first one is this is apparent that new techniques will not impose the above requirements is something they talk about on the sample size, sample distribution, on stationality of the extractivation are much needed. Okay, so the new techniques are much needed. So this paper aims to explore the use of cellular geography for development of such techniques for spatial prediction of plagues. No, that is clear aim. So the question is how to develop a statistical spatial prediction technique for plague prediction without a strict requirement on the sample. That's basically that the question is trying to address. The second one is, you can read the paper. The main aim of this paper is to explore the use of a low frequency association among data elements for error checking for cultivated land quality database. Very specific aim. So the question here is, can low frequency association among the data elements in database be used for error checking in databases? So they're very specific ones, okay? So there's a clear question. Now, the validity of this question, the novel—
Dr. Zhu, looks like, are you moving the slides? Looks like the slides is the first one. Are you changing the slides, or is it supposed to be the first one?
I'm moving along.
But right now we only see the first slide that you saw.
Which first slides? Let me get out here.
Just the title slide.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, we saw you just mentioning, but looks like if you're referring to the slides, we only see the.
I think I got a message said my screen sharing is paused.
Maybe can you stop and reshare?
Let me do that. Okay. You may want to allow me the multiple sharing. Currently, you only allow.
Oh, I see. Let me see here.
If you can click change it. You want me to reshare?
Can you share now?
Let me stop share, reshare.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Let me see if it's correct. Oh, you have to change it. Could you go to screen, share screen, change the screen? Okay, that's good. All right. I apologize for this. I'm appreciated that you told me. Can you see the slides right now?
Yes. Okay. Good to go.
Good to go. Okay. Good. Give me a second. I'll move the other stuff out of my way. All right. So this is called, the first one is called the clear research aims. These are some good examples that I think people might want to think about it, to understand what what is good about it? Basically, it's focused on one issue, okay, not multiple issues, one issue core, okay, and then so they are good about it. They are really focused on the question, the scientific question they're really trying to address. Now here's some of the not so good one that I extracted from the papers I've seen, and certainly I made a modification to it. So there's no really resemblance to the exact the content of the paper, but the basic form is there. So this is one is not so good. So the current studies aims to explore data sets by factor analysis, review the soil property in association with heavy metal pollution in urban areas. Number one. Two, create a prediction surface with the purpose of delineating, quantify the pollution hazard using creating a GIS. So that paper, so the clearly people look and say, oh, this paper is about carrying out a specific task or a process or complete a particular project. There's no question to be addressed here, scientific question, right? So this one. The next one even more that strutted over different areas. So the objective study is to detect the changes in land use, land cover, and its impact on land surface temperature over the past 40 years in particular watershed in some part of the country, right? So that's very specific to an area. And to achieve this, overall objective, the following specific objects are formulated: and analyze this, examine that, investigate, but explore. This describe a process of completing something, but it's not addressing the research issue, the core question they're trying to address. So that kind of paper focusing on the outcome of a specific area or outcome of carrying out a specific task or process. Those kind of papers is very difficult for the reviewer to see the contribution to the literature or what kind of research question they're addressing, what the novelty in addressing that question or the novelty of the question itself. Okay, so this is probably not a good thing to do. So a project report-like papers are very difficult for reviewer to assess the value of it. So typically reviewer would say the academic intellectual merit will be very low. So you want to think about how to structure into a scientific question. So we're seeing more papers like that. And I think there's a reason for this under the current macro climate that people have been pushed to publish. And people say, oh, I've done this work, I can write up something and try and publish it. And some of you get lucky, get published, and some of them may not as lucky. For those who are even lucky to be eventually published, you may have to go through several rounds of reviews or revisions to change your paper to eventually a form that people see the value of your paper. So that kind of a process is not kind of a time efficient. So you might be, I hope today I'll give you some tips that you might be able to follow that you might be able to improve the chance of your paper getting accepted. The second one is called the Justify Novelty. So novelty have to be, what I mean by novelty here is that a question that has not been addressed or not sufficiently addressed in the literature, okay? Not in your country, not by your group, not by you, but the literature. Typically the literature is the knowledge that the human race put together, right? So that has not been addressed in there. Then your innovation, whatever you come out, now will be clear, and then you add something to the literature. So this kind of often the question should be a gap in our knowledge or something which is incorrect in our understanding, but both from literature, again, not you say, or he says, she says, that has to come from the literature. So as I said, it's not a question that you do not know, or not a question that a group of people do not know, is we, the scientific community, do not know, okay? That's is important. So how you achieve this is through something called a literature review, but the literature is not any kind of literature review. It is kind of novelty you sufficiently justify, or the question sufficiently justified through a well-structured, very focused, a thorough review of the literature. Okay, so that is a loaded term. So I'm going to explain a little bit. So the two examples here actually done this pretty well. So I use the first exam as an example to first example as a way to illustrate it. So this is the introduction section for the first paper. I'm not going to read this because they're going to be too time consuming. So what I want to tell you is that for this section, look at it. When you go look at it on your own, the first this part section is actually provide a background and the importance for doing this plague prediction, right? Now you have second next one. This is the one basically provide a narrow the focus to the key area of concern. There's a lot of issue in plague predictions, sample collection, you know, plague prediction, new application, so on and so forth. But this particular one to narrow down the method for spatial prediction, right? For prediction. So that is the focus on. So that's called the narrow. So narrow the focus. And then if narrow and you focus on something that you focus very clearly on under this title, under this area, spatial prediction of flea index or plague. So there are two major types of spatial prediction. Here the focus means that we're not going to list all the individual techniques here. We group them into some sort of categories that illustrate the main theme, main idea behind this different set of techniques. So this is focused. And current papers we so often see say, John said that, William said that, and then Lee did that, Liu did this. It's scattered all over, not concentrated. This one is called focused. And then the second one is, so the focus is to distill the idea behind those techniques and group them together. So you can see the thoughts behind those different techniques. And the structure means that you go through what the first type is, what the second type is, so people can understand all different ideas that exist in literature, rather than be blogged, shadowed by the list of the different research papers without any organization. So this is very well structured. And you can say thorough review, say what it is and how they do it and what are the problems with it. So you kind of really try to narrow down, say the idea and the problem is. So the problem is the one you want to focus on later on in the paper. Okay, so then continue on. So you continue the second type, what it is, and you go through a thorough review of the issues. Then after that, what you do is doing something called analysis of the literature. So based on your summary, based on the review, you into ideas, different ideas in the literature. Then you come to conclude this idea, what are problems with this idea? So analyze it. You eventually then come down to a presentation and the deficiency of the problem that you see from the review and through your analysis, then you say there is a problem with that. So this particular paper is trying to establish that all the existing techniques require sample to be of a certain size or a certain spatial distribution. So that basically says it is a problem. Okay, so that establish the gap in the literature. Then you say the paper at least aims to develop techniques that do not depend on those requirements. So that where you see the linkage, right? Establish what the question is through the literature analysis, a review and analysis. Okay, so that would be the second one. The third characteristics is the paper should be structured around research question. So basically the entire paper should be structured to focus on research question, not about anything else. Okay, so we already seen the introduction section is really there to justify and clearly present the question by review the literature, analyze the literature. So the introduction section often achieve that. So, but what about the rest of it? Well, the method section should be directed to those methods, which is specifically for answering that question. You're not going to list all the detailed techniques that you used. I've seen lot paper describing the simple thing using GIS to data processing and to register the data layers. Those are simple things that anybody with a background GIS will be able to do on themselves. But we want to focus on this question. So the method is directly related to that question, specifically designed to address that question. Then you should be elaborate. You should let people know that what kind of technique we're using to address that question, right? Then the experiment, you should have, in this kind of research, empirical research, you have the control experiment. So the experiment should be designed to answer that question only, okay? Not to complete a whole suite, a procedures for a particular project, right? So that is be redundant and sometimes is sidetracking from the question. The third one is the result of it should be those providing direct answer to the research question. I have seen papers, they present all the outcomes, products from the procedures, okay? So they'll consider result to be say, I'll geo-register to the images. And my questions talk about land use and color probably. Geo-registering images, just a regular process, common process. They will tell you this is the result, discuss it. That's sidetracked significantly. So you don't want to do that. So the fourth element would be the discussion. The discuss section is very important, but many times I see people sidetracking the discussion. The discussion should be focusing on the context or the stability of your answer to the question. So basically, when you address the issue, draw some conclusions, you would tell people, say, under what condition my answer hold or my conclusion will hold. So you want to examine that. You want to see how stable your conclusions are, how generalizable your conclusions are. You want to talk about that. Those conclusion is your answer to the question, okay? So you need to be focused on that. So you can look at those papers that actually do that pretty well. Okay, that will be the three characteristics, okay? The first one would be a very clear question, okay? The second one, that question has to be novel, or question has to be a gap in the literature. The third one is the paper should structure around this question to make sure that we provide a scientific way to answer that question, okay? It's not simply a laundry list of things which you did for a project, okay? So that is a clear distinction that we need to make, right? All right, a structure to adopt for your paper, which is very basic for most paper will follow that kind of structure, but you can modify this, particularly in the method section. You can modify this based on the nature of your paper, but only in the effort to make the key focus, which is the above characteristics about the question, okay, more outstanding or outstanding clear. So people say, look, at very clear, this paper is have the question, is trying to address this question and done in a scientific way in answering that question. That really is about. So let's go through quickly about what each section will do in terms around structure around towards the question. So abstract, I often say abstract is not part of the paper. Well, so all paper has an abstract, but abstract is a nutshell of the paper, which can be used independently. I consider abstract is an ad of your paper. It's not part of your paper. So it is definitely not the introduction part of your paper. Okay, so you're gonna separate this. So, but it should have three basic parts because an ad your paper. So what the research question is, a summary of method that you used to address that question, and the key result, often in a quantitative way, or could it be qualitative as well? And the findings in answer to that question, or the answers to that question you have. So that basically what the abstract is. So majority of the time people read the abstract and see if they want to pursue your paper, right? For sometimes, you know, you have to pay for to access the paper. So the abstract is a good way to know it. So an abstract is a standalone unit, okay? So the second one they call the introduction, which is really the beginning of your paper, right? So this part is to establish the research question. Really is to achieve the first characteristics, right? So typically it has 4 components, you know, 4 parts in introduction. The first part is provide a background of the research, then identify the key issue researcher concerned in this area, okay? But this key issue is not directly your research question. It is where your research question belongs to, okay? So so that you can narrow your review to a subset of literature on the key issue, using the key issue, okay? So otherwise you'll be scattered all over. So the second part is you conduct the literature review, which is structured literature review in the form of, in terms of advancement in ideas, not in who did it, this, who did that. You want to say what ideas exist in literature, and from this idea we can easily identify, or reasonably easy, I say, would say, the issues that are remaining. Okay, so if you look at, if you do a laundry list of all papers, it's very difficult to synthesize those papers. But only if you take this idea of the paper and put them in categories, you can see what kind of idea exists in the literature. From there, you can see what's missing from this idea. The third part is actually synthesize that what you provide in a part 2, and analyze it, which is the analysis of literature, then clearly identify the gap is there. So that which we saw earlier. The fourth part is simply provide an objective, the paper, the aim, basically in stating in a form of objective. It is the basically is transforming the research question into some sort of objective statement or capstone statement or the aim of the paper. Those are probably the way to do it. So that's the 4 elements. So here's another example of use the second paper. So the first part, provide a background and research, identify the key issue in research. So here is the first part. This part pretty much is the background. Now here it is, therefore, error checking large land quality database is an important issue in land quality and land degradation assessment. So that is the important issue, okay? So that narrow down to the area that we want to focus on to do a literature review, because the question is coming from in that area, okay? So the second one, conduct a structured literature review, okay? It comes to say there are 3 basic types of methods for error checking large land quality database. Very clearly stating that there are 3 kinds ideas there, okay? And also it's clearly tied to error checking land database. We're not talking about anything else. We focused structured. And what's the first one? And what's the second one? What's the third one? Now, so here with the introduction is very clean and without a lot of other sidetracking. So this is very clear, the 3 ideas there. Right? Then once you've done that, then you say, after gone through all 3 types, then analyzing it. So it start to analyze this. You could do a 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs to analyze, depending on the situation. But the analysis basically leading to say all the ideas that you have, 3 categories, they do not use the association of the data elements of database to check for error. Sometimes you have situations that the error would have would have been a range of the valid range of the attributes, but the combination of those attributes together, it do not make sense. So this kind of stuff. So that's paragraphs analyzing that. So you could use, and this is a problem that your current techniques cannot address. right? I will invite people to read about this. I thought this is well done. Eventually, once you identify that, then you say this particular paper to explore how can you use a low frequency association as a way, say, as an early detection of errors in a database. Okay, we assume the combination that is not real in reality were very rare because of without human mistakes. Human mistakes do not occur quite a lot, but particularly in a combination fashion, there will be very low frequency that can be used. So that's the idea. So anyway, so that will be the introduction. The methodology section would be, the first one would be the basic idea that I often like very much, because in the paper, we do not really remember all the details of what you do, but we do remember the idea. But the idea is the core, is the innovation we want to see. So the basic idea is the idea of strategy in answering that question. Okay, so this is not about the procedure or process, the flow chart of things. And most people do take that as flow chart, the steps I go through. It's the idea, it's the key, highlighted key contribution of this paper to the literature. So the second one would be the methods. The method section would be focus on the method for implementing or realizing this idea. This method is not about the detailed laundry list of, well, laundry list is a detail, all right? A laundry list of steps you take or different techniques you use in order. That's not. It is actually about the key method, which are at the heart of answering that question. In order to answer this question, what kind of techniques I need to have to do it? Okay. Other thing that is very unique. You need to highlight that. Don't just provide a laundry list, a long list of the workflow. Okay. The third one is the experiment design. So basically say, now we have this key method around, how we'll put this key method together to answer the question. That would be the one. So is the description, the design, the control experiment to find an answer. So in this case, would consist of study area data, okay, a process of procedures, which are only in the key steps in implementing the key method to realize the idea. Here, there's no need to describe the details of common methodology for data preparation, data analysis, okay? Sometimes you might want to do it because this specific preparation of the data set might impact significantly on the answer, okay? The answer. So the answer might be changed dramatically with different preparation of the data. In this case, you might want to address it, but not in the experiment part. Where you do it in the discussion section, which I will talk about later. So this area, you basically say, how to put together the techniques together so that I can really examine whether my idea is new or not. My idea made a difference or not, made a difference or not. Okay, that would be the one. Then the third amount part in this experiment design is to clearly state the evaluation strategy or the evaluation method. So how you say your method is better than the other. So that's very much the control experiment. So the two here, the second one, the procedure process one, is really to put it together. The third is say, I will conduct experiments in some way so I compare them. So that where you really be able to tell something about, say, my idea in answer that question resulted in a good outcome, or say it didn't work, whatever that is, okay? So that is very centered around the question. So the key here is to provide a scientific process to gather the evidence for the answer to the question, okay? It's not about a description, what you did, okay? What you did is, it's actually all what you did around that question, okay? So that control experiments are the most important in the kind of empirical research. So the result section, as I said earlier, a lot of people would be, at least I have seen it for the paper submitted to GIS, also the paper I reviewed for other journals. I see people list all those outcomes, result from the process, and whether it relates to the research question doesn't matter. Okay, that is not really very helpful. Okay, so there's no need to list the intermediate outcome from the analysis. Okay, so but you want to list the result which directly answer the question, or let's say the direct answer to the question should come first, right? So, but as I said earlier, if this product from intermediate step has a significant impact on the outcome, then it should be discussed, but not in the result section, in the discussion section, where the discussion section provide the area for you to examine the context of your conclusion. In other words, say what are the conditions your conclusion will hold or not hold. That is a scientific way to assess how much we should trust your work, how broad impact your research will be, right? So now the discussion section. This is section to discuss the context, the scenario or the condition you're finding and their implication to the literature. So often consists of the following aspect. The first one is the stability of the result, assessed from two basic angles. Okay, the first one examine if different techniques in the key method section would change the outcome of the experiment. Okay, so in turn, if they in turn alter the findings or conclusion, basically saying if I do a different techniques in the place of the one I have, would it completely destroy my outcome or invalidate the conclusion, or the conclusion being different. If this is the case, then you should tell readers about that. So then people understand, so this outcome is only conditioned on that. So we scientists would know, okay, and how to interpret, right? The second one is if the different parameter settings for a key method or technique would change the outcome of the experiment. And in this case, you want to discuss it, right? For example, people may using a kriging. So the semivariate, the different semivariate user may very much change the outcome of your experiment, which probably completely invalidate the conclusion you obtained. So in this case, you want to talk about it. Hope that the discussion say, oh, that's not that sensitive, right? So the second category of the aspect would be the condition, the boundary, your findings. Okay, so such as what kind of a study area, what kind of conditions into data set, so on and so forth, all kind of stuff. The third one is most important one. I wouldn't say most important, I misspoken here, is the important aspect of it, the paper. And sometimes I think this is the very important thing that we must include. Basically say, how our findings, the answer to our scientific question, change our understanding. What's the impact on the existing knowledge? Okay, what is the contribution to literature? So that would be really the highlight of your paper. That's why earlier I misspoken as the most important. And some people may think that way, but for me it's very important because this is the area that you really actually provide evidence to say my research question is novel, is important. See, this answer to the question change our understanding. What's more important than that as a scientist? Say we now contribute to the literature in such a way that we understand the nature of our society better. So that's very important. You know, most people probably won't go that high level, but still have some implications for the existing literature, right? So that would be the discussion. The third one would be the final one is the conclusion, which is pretty easy. That is the key finding and their implications. Typically consists of following three areas: a summary of the key method addressed the question, the key findings and their implications, and potentially the condition, the context of the conclusion that you draw from it. In this conclusion, it's not about, it's not abstract. So that's why there you don't meet the numerical result or quantitative results. Okay, so you don't need that. You just, when people read the paper, most people that do this way, they read the paper, the introduction section, what the question you are trying to address. Okay, then most of people flip to the conclusion and say, did you actually resolve that? That would be, if people say further interest, okay, I want to see how you did it. What are the ideas behind it? So that kind of stuff they do. So people normally do not read your paper from beginning to end. They're not going to read every single word the way you hope them do. Okay, so you have to put them in that way so people allow people to say, oh yeah, the person addressed the issue. Okay, so this is very important to have that included in the conclusion. So now I move on to say, now we know what's important. So the important characteristics. Okay, we also know the structure we could follow and how we work together to put it in a form that easy for author to follow, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an example as the car mechanics, okay, later. So let me first provide an overview. So the first two characteristics we are done in the introduction section that we've seen earlier, right? Actually, with the paper being rejected or not, okay, probably the introduction plays very important role. If I want to put a percentage on that, probably I would say about 60 to 70% of the paper we rejected it purely based on the introduction because there's no clear question. So for the two papers, the two bad examples you've seen, those are the ones just reject on that level because there's no scientific question. It's simply a description of procedures for completing a task. That's not very interesting to anybody, right? We're not elementary students. We're not learning how to do that. We want scientists. We want to know more about your contribution to the knowledge that we have, right? So that is very important. Okay. And then the third one is structure around the answer to the research question. This one is actually is the rest of the paper will do. So so the basic idea is there sections with a strategy to address it. Method section is how to answer the question. The result section is the answer for the question, and then the discussion would be the context of your answers. So all related to that research question around that. And certainly, people didn't write very well in that section. They probably get rejected. But if you do well in the introduction section, and the third characteristics can be improved on, people will give you an opportunity, particularly as I can see it. I've been exercising this practice, and also I've been informed by other editors that are that what they do. So so I had a lot of discussion with one of the editors in the Katina as well. So talk about this. So they think that area we might allow user to improve on, as long as they have clear question, maybe how they go about it, or the way the document, how they do about it, maybe outline. Now this is easy, can help them. But the scientific question section, that's very difficult. That requires the individual to go through the literature to analyze it. Editors are very limited in the way that help the author to do that, because we are not expert in a particular research topic, but we are quite comfortable into how you structure paper to answer the question in a scientific way. So this way we can provide comments to you. Sometimes, we even take a effort to do some editing of that portion, that kind of stuff too. Yeah, but I don't hope you depend on editor to edit your manuscript. We're editor, not really doing that kind of editing. So sometimes we do. It depends on what the goal of the journal is and whether the editor want to push the journal into certain areas. If that, then editor will do some of that work. But regularly, we don't do that kind of direct editing. But nevertheless, I would say this is a very important part of it. And if you don't do well, you may not have a chance to go through the second part to review, to change your research methodology section. So So you probably want to spend a bit of time thinking about the introduction section. Okay. Now let me go back to use an example. The example is, okay, say we are improving a car engine, right? So let's think about it. I believe most people know about driving a car, what's the most important part of a car, right? So let's see how corresponding to the scientific effort in improving a car engine. Okay, so the introduction section here basically say you are identifying, justifies the deficiency in the engine. Okay, you could do that in many ways. Okay, you can do that based on the current efforts in building engine, how that is inefficient, or you use statistics to do that. Some people do use a application oriented, use a lot of statistics to justify this is not doing well. But here is just one question. Okay, typically for engineer, they are not going to mold everything together. It was very difficult to see which one works, which doesn't work. They are using so-called hypothesis testing. Okay, I say the hypothesis testing is only take on one question at a time. So it is one question. So the basic idea section is basically the engineer would say, okay, now I know this deficiency here. So what is my idea or strategy to address that deficiency based on my knowledge of the engine mechanics or some other physics, right? Here, then I design a way to do that. That would be the one. The method section, the key method section is really actually is the key method for addressing the engine deficiency based on above the idea. So let's talk about, say, hey, you need to use a certain material and how the certain material will be made in a certain way to improve the engine. You talk about that. You're not talking about your front bumper and the back bumper or stuff like that. It's nothing to do with the engine. So you're building a bumper is a certain method. It has nothing to do with improving engine for that, the design, okay? So don't lump that into it. And the experiment design here would be two parts. First one is you now know the method to improve the engine and how we put this method together, build a new engine, right? Based on the idea and the key methods. And then you have to assemble a new car. The second one, assemble a new car based using new engine. Then assemble another car using an old engine, but with all the other parts the same. So in this case, you can compare the performance of these two cars, but only those two cars, they are only different in the engine. So any performance difference in the car are related to the engine, they're called control experiment. That's where the experiment, you think about that as well. Then the result section basically say you examine the performance of the new engine, such as horsepower, acceleration, and any explanation of those measures, how say this is better. And then discussion comparison in performance with the other car, the car with the old engine, but the same parts. Okay, so in this case, the further to justify your new design, new engine is better than the old engine. Okay, so that way, so that is, let's say, the research question beginning, say your engine, the old engine is deficient. So now I adjust the issue, and then the new engine is better than the old engine. So I directly answer that question. So nothing else. I don't talk about the color of the car, how painted it, you know, I don't talk about anything else. That's another important, because they are the same for both cars, right? So the only difference in the engine, so we should focus on engine rather than focus on something else, okay? So the discussion with this here would talk about the impact or the sensitivity, the performance of the new engine, okay? If there's any key material or key method used to build an engine changes, okay? So, and also some other things, the condition for the improved engine, certainly is the engine for, so probably a car, you do not want to use it for a truck, right? Certainly is not designed for that way. So those kind of stuff, right? You talk about the same thing in your paper, you talk about your research outcome. And also discuss the prospect of new engine, okay? How good is going to be, you know, how we change the car industry, right? And even probably implications for the engine manufacturing process. This is the same as the idea of implication for the knowledge in this field. Well, engine manufacturing is a knowledge, right? So how would you impact that? So here, the same thing, you should think about that. So if you think about that, then reviewers say, oh, gee, okay, I'll look at it. So this is very good, interesting. And I didn't even know about that. I didn't know about this work. I can lead in this kind of potential impact. So they can see your novelty clearly. Okay. If a reviewer can see the novelty clearly, would the reviewer would say, going to reject your paper? No, I don't think so. Well, at least if the reviewer did it, then editor will come in and say this reviewer is biased, right? So there are mechanisms there in the review process protecting you if you've done that well, done this way. So if you didn't do that, and then in this case, we often, well, most time we respect reviewers' the decision, but sometimes we do change. But majority of the time we follow, and most of this time we follow is the time we clearly agree with the reviewer that there is a missing part of it in the manuscript. The conclusion would be a conclude statement, right? You finish this project, maybe you've done some work for, and you're going to publish it, or you tell your, not publish it, tell your boss, say what you have achieved. You don't want to, write a very long list of things. You want a conclude statement about the improved engine and its prospect, so on and so forth, okay? So that's the conclusion. So basically where you can see, after your control experiment, after you research, what the conclusive statement that you can make about your answer to the question that you identified earlier. So that would be the way. Hope at least to help you. At least would be an example to help you to think about how you, when you write a paper, how you structure paper in such a way that you really focus on the scientific question, and then how you address it, how you what the answers are, how stable the answers are, and what kind of implication is for the field that you have, or for the field that they addressing the key issue you identified in the introduction section. Right? Okay, so the summary. My time's up. Let me finish up quickly. I want to say this: a scientific paper or an empirical research paper is not about a project. It's not a project report, which that documents the processes, procedures in completing a task or project. It's not about that. Okay, so try not to do that. If you do that, your paper will be the likelihood of the paper will be rejected very, very, very high. 3 varies. So think about it. But a paper, a scientific paper, it is a paper about addressing a research gap or research question in the literature. Okay, so the paper has to document the justification, the gap, the idea of experiment that in addressing this gap, and the answer you provide to fill that gap. Eventually, the implication of you filling this gap for the literature. So that would be, I think. So if you want me to summarize my talk in 3 take-home message, the first one is clearly state your research question. The second one is to well justify your research question. The third one is structure paper around scientific questions. So scientific question, scientific question, scientific question. That's the key, right? I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu, for the very informative and intriguing talk. Certainly, personally, I find it very helpful, and I'm sure a lot of, especially students and early career scholars, will find it very, very useful. And there are a lot of things in here, but Dr. Zhu explained in a way that's in plain language that people can understand, and especially like the improving car engine example, I think it's very, very convincing and it's very easy to follow. So definitely it's very, very useful. And so we are going to open the floor for questions, but before we do that, let me give a kind of a summarize of, let me see here, CPGIS, this one. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Here, move this one here. Okay, so this is my summary, like to the journal structure. And this is something for me, but personally, when I'm writing the paper, and it's resonated me a lot because it follows kind of a similar structure. So it's like a filter, two-sided. And so basically, at the beginning, you get background, get more like general introduction to the question, why it is important, and what's the gap. Then you basically narrow down the question to this specific one that you're trying to address. And then blah, blah, this is what I did, this is how I designed, this is how I did that. And gradually at the end, you report the result, but in the discussion, you always keep in mind, how can other people utilize this? What has become possible after my novelty or my innovation, whatever, you should somehow explain. So it's more like, in Chinese, it's called 前后呼应. You always surround, center around your research questions. And at the end, you should address your question, but you should also somehow expand this one to the general scientific community or in the discipline, what has become possible after you have done this. And so always keep in mind that you are writing a paper, certainly the very detailed structure that Dr. Zhu presented is very, very helpful. So if you can center around your paper using this kind of structure, it's not the only one, but this, I think, a very effective structure that most people can follow and to present. And basically you are telling a story, why this is important, why I'm doing this, what's the gap, and how I did it, and how other people can utilize my stuff. And I think it's like in plain language, this is just my kind of a summary to Dr. Zhu's fantastic presentation. All right, so next, let me unmute here. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand, and I'm also going to, you can unmute yourself. Let me change the settings. Okay, so now you should be able to unmute yourself. If you have any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask Dr. Zhu for any questions that you might have. Anyone? Let me see here. There's some question. There's one.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Zhu. Thank you, give me a very fantastic introduction about how to write a paper. I have a question about the structure. We have really we have 6 parts about first structure. First is introduction to background of your paper. The second is build the link about your background and your research. 3 is the research gap about your literature and your research. 4 is introduction to many content or result. 5 is the significance. Maybe my English is very poor. Thank you.
I'm not sure what the question is. So
how to write the abstract?
Abstract. Or how to write
yes.
abstract. It typically have 3 parts. The first one very quickly stating what research question you have, right? So that the second one is you give people a general idea how you addressing that question, what kind of methods you used it, and typically that is done in a very logical, very coarse but logical sequence of methods. So it's more kind of process how you did it. but not in detail, very coarse, where you lay out the key methods there and summarize what you did there. Okay. And the third one would be your result. So that basically telling people how well that question is answered. And with that, you also said, I had to tell people, say, what all this mean? You know, I have this question, I did this way, I did it, and this is the result. What all it mean? Which is the, as you said, the significance or the contribution to the literature. So that you want to add, say, for example, in one of those papers, we'll talk about low frequency. You basically said, you know, but the implication for that is before we won't be able to detect this kind of error. Now with this new method, we have expanded our ability to be able to detect the error in the database. So more than those existing methods. So that would be the significance. All this experiment, all this research coming to tell us by using the low frequency of association between the elements or the data fields in the database. That's basically trying to say. Okay. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah, thank you. I know, thank you.
I had one person say, why do we not putting the quantified results into the conclusion section? The conclusion section is a part of the paper. The conclusion section is unlike an abstract. The abstract sometimes taken out of the papers on its own. So you need to provide, when you say it's good, you provide a quantitative measure there. But in the conclusion, because the part of the paper, if you want to know the result, they can go back to the result section, read about it. So there you don't need to repeat the numerical result into the conclusion because it is a part of the paper. But the abstract is actually independent part of the paper. So it's not, that's why I put a 0 there. I not put a 1. There's a reason for putting a 0 because that's an independent. That's not part of your paper. It's an add of your paper. Okay. So that's why you put the number there, but conclusion is part of the paper. So you should not repeat that in the result, because in the result, you would generalize the result to provide an answer to the question. So some of the statistics, the numerical value, eventually you have to distill to some key numbers. You're just not gonna. Another problem I see in writing with junior authors, basically, so they describe everything in the result. No, you need to distill. You need to analyze the result. Say, focus on the result that answer the question, okay, or answer or does not answer the question. Or, but you got to focus on the result, have directly relate to the question. Okay. Yeah.
There's another one from A-Xing asking, because earlier you said one paper basically address one research question, but sometimes we might have some kind of situation that you kind of have a key question, but you might have some secondary questions. And is it appropriate to, or is it redundant to present all questions in one paper?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And then the way I actually like it, or the way I encourage my student to do, is to one paper focus on one question, so they can thoroughly discuss that question and well. And then you feel like it's important. Now there's a difference about things you talk about in discussion, and versus the scientific question you outline, justify in the introduction. Okay, so in the question coming in the introduction has to be just one. That's the key core question. Now there are other issues related to this question. There are some of the important to be independent question that you can write another paper about it. Some of them can be easily addressed in a discussion without a fair thorough analysis of literature. For example, one of the questions would be to say, how if I use a different method to this, what are the consequences to this particular solution? And that is not a different question. It should be part of discussion of the context of the condition. Okay, so this is a very, very, I try to make it black and white, but oftentimes it's difficult. It's not black and white. It's gray, because as a scientist engaged in discussing literature, you might discover one core question. That core question starts to spread into multiple other questions. That potentially you can set up a new program, right? Innovation. That's what the science advances. You start from one small question, eventually branch out to multiple questions. So I don't want to say that you are not encouraged to pursue the other question. I'm simply say in one paper, you adjust one question. In the process of addressing that question, then other questions may arise, right? May arise. In this case, let's say you use different papers to adjust them. Okay, so that's how you, in a lot of universities, prefer a faculty member, particularly junior faculty member, come in. They follow a thread. A thread is basically an initial question. They expand, and then expand, create a new set of knowledge. And those, when you come up to the tenure stage, you know, the committee will look and say, what this individual has created for us, the human race, a new understanding, new technology for us to use, for us. So that would be one. So it's not done in one paper. So allow me to say a little bit more. I want to addressing the PhD students, okay? I want to tell you this. The PhD thesis is the beginning of your career. It's not the end of your career, remember that. So when you do a PhD thesis, you focus on something very clear. Don't try to completely do a lot of things together lump. And this sometimes counterintuitive, intuitive and also counterproductive as well. So I want to say, so you focus on one paper, one question per paper, and then you have multiple questions. You can write multiple papers. Okay.
All right. Next question from Brian Pai. What's the similarity and differences between abstract and conclusions? I think somehow you already kind of addressed this one in an earlier question, but if you have anything to add, you can.
Yeah, it's a question I anticipated because it's still a troubling thing for me when I'm writing my own papers. To say the way I would say that the abstract focus on the question, the result, and the conclusion draw. The abstract does not talk about context too much. It doesn't have to talk about, and then the abstract will have a numerical data in there. The conclusion, you do not specify the question. The question is there already. You only provide summary of the method. So the summary method could be similar to the abstract, but the result there is not enumerated. The results are not supported by numerical value. Is presented in the context of its limitation, its conditions, so on and so forth. So that is much more towards tuning towards a person reading this conclusion, say, okay, what I find and what I need to be aware of. Okay, so the abstract is much more broadly about the question and the methods, and it is a. Well, you might say if I watch a movie, movie preview is much more than abstract. But the movie, when you do it, sit down writing a summary about the movie, that's probably more like a conclusion. That's if I can help you. But I know it's a very vague area that's very easily gonna be. But it definitely, if you apply the things I talk about it, no reviewer say the abstract the same is the conclusion the same as the abstract. Because you don't have the question, you don't have the numerical value, you add more on the discussion conditions, implication, things like that, right? So which is clearly different from the abstract.
Yeah, so there I can also add maybe another point. I think abstract is something that pretty much most important that people will read. If your abstract is not interesting, doesn't contain information that the readers want to see, probably they don't want to read the full text. But for the conclusions, you assume that people already somehow read your part of your introduction, skim through your results or methodology. So basically, you don't need to be as comprehensive as abstract that you need to kind of introduce the background and something like that. But certainly, it's also important. You need to put all your key takeaways of your paper, what people have learned from this paper. But I think abstract is the single most important. If the abstract it doesn't sell your point, it will fail. So always keep that in mind. And the next question is from MCR. Do we need to write down the limitations in our manuscript or only when the reviewers ask us to do so?
Well, it should be part of the context that actually the scope. I don't suppose you could add something to it, but there are two things you do not want to do. The first thing, you do want to write a limitation in such a way negated the whole effort you have done. So reject your conclusion. So you don't want that, because some people say, oh, my data is incomplete, oh, my method is not. If you started doing that, people say, why don't you fix that? Those are things not. We often talk about limitations only in the context of the application and the boundary condition of the experiment. We talk about probably that. So that would be what you do. So you do not want to negate it. The second one, you do not want to overdo. So if it's something you feel necessary that you have not, people will probably can misconceive your research. To take it to an extreme, then you put something in there to say, yeah, this is conditioned, right? So most papers probably don't do any more than that. Say this condition, that result should be understood in its context at all. They're not going to elaborate it. There's another thing people often do is a future research. Now this paper is not about future research. This paper is about your current research for the current question. So take those things out, okay? If you want to write another paper, you do somewhere else. Don't do it here, because otherwise you sidetrack your point. So the key is sidetrack your point. You might put a few sentences, say, further effort could be pursuing the direction. That's it. You don't want to do more than that.
Okay, next one from JK. How can I justify the boundary between abstract and introduction? For me, introduction is like a longer version of abstract. Should I include duplicate context in these two sections?
No, introduction, abstract are, I'm being blunt, okay? I'm sorry, very blunt. Say those are completely different. Okay, abstracts independent units. It's an independent means it's actually, you can think abstract as not part of paper. So people don't have to rely anything in the paper to understand the abstract. So as a nutshell of the content there. So you have an introduction, the question, okay, not introduction, question, the summary methods, and the result and conclusion. Okay, those three things. The introduction section doesn't have that. The latter two. The introduction section is the research question, but very elaborated justification of the research fact question. So the entire section is just trying to make the first elements of the abstract more clear. Okay, so it is to justify the research question. So you buy, Dr. Wu has created a nice picture here. It's called the funnel, right? The funnel thing is a very wide background, and slowly you narrow it to the research issue, the key issue. Then from there you sort out the literature and arrive to the question that you want to address. Okay, so that's what the introduction part of it. So introduction, abstract is completely different. I hope that I have answered your question.
Yeah, I can also add to that. So basically, abstract is kind of a concise version of your paper. It basically includes all the components: introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, usually like 1 or 2 sentences. But introduction does not include the methods, does not include the results or discussion. So they are very different. And next question, how to tell a book story in the introduction? Do you have any experiences to share, and how to quickly summarize the literature?
Yeah, this is a loaded question, and it's easy. The question easy in terms of there's several things. To my student, I'm teaching them to how to read the literature, how to read a paper, read the literature, and how to take the idea of the literature, organize into a system of knowledge. And from that process, and how you tie, how to understand what get missing in each of the branches. So system knowledge is like a knowledge tree. So from there, once you have the knowledge tree, then you say, I'll take this branch, I'm going to elaborate it, that kind of stuff. So that would be very elaborated way to go about it. That basically, essentially, I believe the graduate school is really about. The graduate school is really about force you to, I'm sorry, I use the term force, a very, very bad term, but encourage you to, maybe I say, encourage you to go to the literature, understand the literature, and once they understand the literature, it's not about memorize every papers, what they did. Understand the theme or the stream of thought, okay, exist in this particular field. And those thoughts are, some are big, some are small. They have different levels. You have the category at the structured in proper way, so that this almost like a tree to you. So if you have a clear tree, image of tree, and then you go, so which branch ought to go get that fruit? You can clearly know, right? If you just see a bunch of leaves, no branches there, then you have no way to get to it, right? So that has to be established. So that is basically training in graduate school. Nowadays, it's challenging. I'm probably old-fashioned, right? And there's some graduate students now say they consider exciting is take new techniques, grab some data, do number crunching. Oh, come on, some results, great. This program running. Well, that's not what scientists is about. Scientists is about understand the literature. If you can say, sit down, read the literature, say, oh, it is exciting. This is a new idea coming. I need to understand this idea. No, how this idea linked to the other idea. Then I think you are really set for doing it. I'm very strong worded term, say probably very good in academia, because you need to know what knowledge exists there. So graduate students should have focused on that. Certainly eventually you need to go to say how I implemented this thing, right? But that's secondary. That's as far as I can see it. Second, the most important thing is the idea, in the literature. So if experience or maybe some wise suggestions, basically probably have to understand the literature first and be able to build a knowledge tree for the area that you're interested in. That's number one step. And in this case, when you're writing the second portion, the second part 2, the literature review, you're writing the idea, structure the thing around the idea rather than who did what, okay? So hopefully that is helpful. So a important part of that is to develop a thorough understanding of the literature in your research area.
All right, we have gone over time, like more than half an hour. So I would maybe ask one last question. I think some of the audience asked earlier that if you can share the PowerPoint slides.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to share it, and I'll make a PDF file and send it.
That'd be great. So we also post the recording on CPGIS and some of the social media website, and so it's very intriguing. It's very helpful. I'm sure a lot of audience will also find it very helpful. And thank you very much for taking the time to share with us your insights and your experiences from the many years of publication and research. So we greatly appreciate your time. And getting the paper accepted is not just about writing. It also involves a lot of revisions, and I can envision maybe in the future we can have another webinar focusing on how to revise your paper, how to respond to the reviewers' comments, and then how to better satisfy the reviewers' comments, and then to get your paper submitted. Because this one today is just basically the first step. Submit your paper to the journal, and there are a long way to go to get a paper submitted. So definitely, I think we can down the road can plan another one for like focus on reviews and to share experiences or insights how we can make the process more smooth. Get your paper submitted. All right. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you very much for Dr. Zhu for the fantastic presentation. Dave, give a round of claps to Dr. Zhu for the presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity, and welcome to contribute to End of GIS. When you see an invitation to review from me, please do accept.
I don't know. Do you mind? I have a really short question to ask Professor Zhu. This is Frank. I'm just because you mostly this structure pretty good for most of a research area. I'm just wondering if kind of for the research paper about the methodology development and or modeling stuff. There's kind of any difference? Maybe you just give us a couple of sentences, for advice or something. Any difference?
Yeah, the example I use is most based on methodological work.
Mm-hmm.
But I divided that into two categories of current papers. One is on the methodological. The other one is a knowledge advancement. Okay, that's
okay, great.
They basically follow the same thing. The same thing. You have the same similar way. For example, you discover so let's say talk about theory. If an advance in theory, right?
Yeah.
So the theory say you first have to justify the deficiency of the existing theory. That is the research question, right? The second one, the methodology section, basic idea say when you say that is deficiency, what idea to patch it? What are your idea behind it? So that's the basic idea. Then next time, how to prove that your idea is good. So that basically how I implement this whole thing. Do control experiment, control. So based on this understanding, this is what I got. Based that understanding that you get, it compares to discuss. It's the similar way. So there's not much difference. It might require a little bit of tweaking, but you pretty much can fold that into this particular structure. That's what my quick suggestion.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dr. Zhu.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.